I'm Chris McDonough, a retired homicide detective. I've interviewed thousands of people, from serial killers to ministers. Welcome to the interview room. Welcome to the interview room, everybody. So grateful you're with us tonight. Time to take a seat. I know that you are having while we're waiting, chime into the chat here. Tell us where you're at. As always, coming to you from an undisclosed location. At TIR, we follow the evidence wherever it takes us on a case. All parties are innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. But you have to put your trust into us, and we will. All opinions are welcomed here. We only ask that you keep them safe, classy, and honest. Thank you always to our mods, our team lead, Miss Sophia, Maui Girl, Mimi J2, Teresa M. Without you, none of this is possible. We also thank our subscribers and our members. We feel so blessed to have you as part of our team. With all of you, we can move mountains of justice for families and for victims. Tonight's guest, my special friend, a great American, war hero, brilliant legal mind, former colonel in the military, former judge, former attorney. He's still an attorney. Probably one of the best in the country, doing God's work in so many ways for so many people. Mr. Billy Little Jr. is here with us tonight, folks. It's going to be a good show. We're going to talk about Kiely Rodni, Ronnie Lawson, and Dee Warner. Tonight's a sensitive topic, so we're going to approach it with dignity and respect for all involved. Tell me where you're at. Idaho's in the house, North Carolina, Wisconsin, the Great Lakes, Michigan, South Carolina, Virginia, Louisiana, British Columbia, our folks in the north. NorCal's here. Hi, Melissa. JP, Tennessee, LA, Virginia, Edinburgh, Scotland, Toronto, Canada, Nashville. So great to have you all here. Let's go, Brandon, in Florida. Detroit. Awesome. So great to have you all here with us this evening. Billy, how you doing, my friend?
Fantastic, Chris. How are you doing?
Good, buddy. It's you look great. You look great. How's the crib doing up there?
Oh man, fantastic. I am more blessed than I should be.
Yeah, I know.
Certainly more than I deserve.
You've been going 1,050 miles an hour and, doing great things. And I appreciate your time this evening, to kind of, as we talked about this earlier in the week, it's, there's a lot going on with these three particular cases. And I know that the last time you were here, we had, well, I don't think we've given anybody an update on the green vehicle, not to throw a curveball at you real fast, but I think you figured that piece of the puzzle out, didn't you?
What green vehicle? I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, and welcome Pittsburgh and the Philly fans. Congratulations, you're going to the World Series. So good for you guys. Absolutely. Absolutely. So there's a lot we're going to cover tonight, folks. And, of course, Billy, he can chime in on all the legal stuff. And, so we're going to take this in three pieces. We're going to start first with Kiely Rodni. Then we're going to go into Mr. Lawson, Brandon, the son of Ronnie Lawson, the sheriff out there in Hawkins County in Tennessee. And then, of course, if time permits, Billy will give us a kind of a high level. We're not going to tip our hat yet because there's still a lot of information that he's been holding back, and we don't want to get out in front of it yet until some folks have some things. So then we'll touch on Dee, and then at any time, if at the end of each segment, we'll do a Q&A, and then we'll bounce over to the next one. So the first one we're going to start here is I have just as always. Hang on for a minute. I think I just there you go. We're just going to do Kiely first, and we're going to touch on some of the most recent information that I was able to figure out from behind the scenes, and find out what the next steps are, if any, and then just take this one step at a time. So, Billy, I know you've had a chance to look over the autopsy report and read a whole bunch of other stuff, brother. What say you?
Yeah. So, looks like horrible tragedy for that young lady and her family. Looks like she was out with some friends, then driving home on a dark, unlit road next to a lake. Must have lost control of the vehicle, drove right into the water. Car flipped upside down. She might have been trying to get out because she was found near the rear of the car, but she was found inside the car. I've read the autopsy. I've seen the toxicology reports. I've also seen what someone has purported to be a video of that car actually leaving the road, going into the water. Just horrible, horrible for that family. And there's nothing you can say when you lose a teenage daughter. There's no comfort. But we can do things not to make it worse for them. The finding was that it was drowning, and that seems consistent with the evidence. There was some discussion, at least on the internet, about, there's THC in her system. There's no actual reading on that in the report. It says that it met the threshold. At one point, it was 20 nanograms. That is the threshold. Another part says that it's 40 nanograms as a threshold, that it met that, but we don't see an actual reading in there. And that's an extremely low threshold. That's the threshold that is used when employers want to hire you and test you to see if you've been using marijuana. If you used it a week ago, it may show up like that. Or if you're a habitual user, that'll pop. Now, you aren't necessarily high, right? And some people say that could even be secondhand. That's so low. If somebody was actually high, I would expect to see a couple hundred to maybe 1,000 or more nanograms. So 20 or even 40 is an extremely low measurement. And since we don't have the actual number, anything more than that is just speculation. I've seen the ethanol reading, and of course, people on the internet have rightly stated that increases over time. So you should expect to see that higher in a body that's started to decompose. And so at a 0.08, Maybe she had one drink. Maybe she had two drinks. Maybe I don't know. Maybe she didn't have anything. Maybe the ethanol was created due to decomposition. We don't know. There's allegedly one of her friends out there that says that she was uh, drunk at the party. All right. Well, the toxicology doesn't support that. And having handled a bunch of DUI and drunk witness testimony, you've got to really drill down. If somebody actually said that, you would have to talk to them and say, well, what's your basis for knowledge of that? Did you know her? Did you see her? Was she stumbling? Could she perform fine motor functions and skills? And could she talk? Was she able to text on her phone? Was she able to stick her key right in the door? I mean, there's so much that you could drill down into it, but based on the findings of the autopsy report, I don't even see that that's necessary. I accept that it was an accidental drowning. I understand that people want to know, hey, well, how come there's no water in her lungs? And guess what? I want to know too, right? So you've got to ask the question, and the medical professionals will tell you that, the gases that are created can expel the fluid in the lungs. So you're not going to see it. It would be different than, say, a smoke inhalation case where you're going to see actual fibers in the lungs, right? You're just talking about a liquid here that prevents her from absorbing oxygen. Humans need the oxygen, and they can't make it out of water like fish do. So horrible tragedy. If there was something here, I know that people like to get on the internet and talk about conspiracies. If there was something here that somebody said, "Oh, I have a witness who says that they were going to kill her," or something like that. Somebody had a motive for it. I'd be open to hearing that, but the evidence just doesn't support that. I mean, even a professional hitman could not have killed her in this manner with no injuries to the body, no injuries internal to the mouth, no skeletal injuries. And she was simply found in her car when she ran off the road into the water. It was horrible, and I feel bad for the family.
Yeah, I think one of the heavy parts here, obviously, is, I was looking for the trauma aspect of this as well. I mean, typically if somebody's, every case is different. You and I both know that.
Mhm.
But the sophistication of, this poor girl being in the back of the car, closing the door, i.e. the back hatch, leaving her in the back and then jumping in the front seat, driving the car into the water, and then, miraculously getting out of that vehicle. Okay. Could it be done? Of course, it can always be done. But then you have to ask yourself, okay, well, what makes her incapacitated, to your point, being in the back of that vehicle? And the toxicology, unfortunately, is not pointing that way, nor any of the other medical evidence that says, hey, I think the public doesn't quite understand that, in the ME's office, they put them through, x-rays top to bottom to see if there's any bullets or anything like that, trauma, et cetera. And in this particular case, they didn't see anything on her. And in fact, even her garments are in the inappropriate areas. I mean, they're not, signs of an essay or anything to that effect. And so I think one of the things I want to tell our audience here, Billy, is the Chippies will probably not release any of the findings of the accident or the officer's findings on the accident. And that's predicated on California Government Code 6254F, as in Frank. And I think some of the reason for that, and I'm just kind of reading into this right now, there's a whole variety of reasons, but I think with some of the backlash that's taken place with all these teenagers, they can lean on Section F under endangering the safety of witnesses or the investigation of the investigative integrity. So the fact that people are going after the teenagers actually allows them to prevent releasing the full accident report. And they can do it under the California Government Code. And I suspect that the FBI findings are going to be just attached to the sheriff's investigation. And we know that the sheriffs have concluded that this is a case closed, a drowning / accident. So thoughts on that?
The internet, I mean, you're using it to great effect. I mean, it's a great tool for investigations. I think more police agencies will start to recognize that. You've used it. It's just an amazing positive thing, but it can also be damaging. I mean, people can allege things without any foundation, without any basis, can just say it, right? Well, I think one of the friends was involved. Well, now you're damaging the friends. You have no evidence. You're just out there speculating. Um, and I think it's appropriate and respectful to the family that they not release all of that and that these other kids be allowed to grieve and mourn and move on with their lives as well. Um, yeah, it's just another horrible tragedy from a teenager who drove home and drove into water, and it's horrible. Can I
Well,
just say one thing though about that? So
yeah, go.
I always carry something in my my pocket knife. I always carry something in my car that I can use to break out a window. So this little piece will break out a window. Sometimes they're on the end of. Oh, there we go. Yeah, this little piece will break out a window, and sometimes they're on the end of the tire pressure gauges. But if you don't have anything, you can pop off that headrest, and at the end of the headrest are these same points like this, and you can use the headrest to break out a window. But you got to keep your cool. And I don't want to go into the details of what and speculate about what she may have been trying to do because I don't want to torture the family with it. But she apparently was trying to get out of that car, and it's just a horrible tragedy. And I don't. Yeah, if somebody out there has evidence to show otherwise,
Yeah,
I'd be
I'd like to
willing to
see it.
look at it. I'm not closed-minded about it, but I'm not going to engage in speculation. And there are so many unsolved cases out there that need help. So if you want to get involved in this community, by all means, we all need your help. But this is not the case for that. So I would say let's move on.
Yeah, so I mean, here's the final conclusions from the sheriff's department, right? I mean, closed, accident, drowning from the ME, and they weigh also in this particular statement. You can't read it very well, but there's in here there is no evidence pointing to criminal activity.
There's no poison, no skeletal damage, no injuries, no torn clothing. I mean, there's nothing that would indicate nobody with a motive, no witnesses. I mean, it's just nothing that points to anything other than a drowning.
Yeah, I mean, I've even heard other folks, and it's not detrimental to anybody, obviously, because I'm not like that, and you're not like that. But people that are talking about when the body was removed out of the car, they should have left it in the car. There are certain times and there's certain things that sometimes, yeah, that's a good idea to leave a victim in a trunk. You take them to the ME's office and you process them out of the trunk. But in this case, in a drowning, the body is going to decompose so fast once that body hits the air. Okay. And so what they did is, the right protocol. Unfortunately, they had to roll the car over to get the car up. And, some evidence was, fell out, and they could have done a better job there. That's for sure. No question about that. But then they had to pull that, vehicle out, and they had to remove her out of that vehicle because that vehicle was going to the evidence lab in Sacramento and the FBI, and then ultimately to the CHP. So you can't, you don't want to take the vehicle right away to the ME's office. You want to take the body to the ME's office so that you don't have, decomposition taking away any evidence that would have been available.
Yeah.
So that was the right thing to do. And Billy, you've had me on the stand,
Well,
as far as police. Go ahead.
I made a decent living out of poking holes in police investigations. And there is no perfect police investigation. But what does that mean? That does it mean that there was something, untoward going on here? No. So let's think about the physics of it. So the car, the heaviest part of the car is the engine part, right? So that's going to be down. The lighter part of the car is going to be the back. So that's going to be a little elevated. When a person goes into the water, dies, and then starts to decompose, they fill with gas. So they start to float. And when it floats, they go up, right? And so at the highest part of the car is going to be the back of the car. That's where I would expect to find a body where a person has drowned in a car. Unless they're seat belted in. But as soon as they go into the water, they're going to try and get out of the seatbelt. So,
Yeah, I mean, go ahead.
if this was a homicide, would you want to, okay, don't disturb the position of the car, the position of the body, we'll get that out of there. Maybe that would be beneficial. I mean, that's speculation too. So would you not want to roll it over to get it on its wheels so that you can get it out of there? That's going to be a nightmare. That's going to be a logistical nightmare. And as you said, time is not your friend. You need to start examining the body and the evidence as soon as possible. So to mess around and get a helicopter in there, and so that you don't have to roll the car onto its wheels so that you can logistically get it out of the water, that's a waste of time. In a perfect world, with unlimited resources and unlimited time, maybe you could do that, but not necessary in this case. What they did seems appropriate, and I'd tell you if I didn't think it was. So it seems like they did the right thing here.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot, there's a lot of questions, it's an emotional case. I mean, this sweet girl did not, should not have passed away. And Billy and I, we respect where you guys are coming from in the chat. I mean, we get it. We're, and yo, main girl, I love you to death. You know that. And I know you're close to this because obviously I'm watching the chat go by here, but at the same time, sometimes, you have to have the evidence that's pointing that way outside of just, people, a bunch of teenagers getting together for a party. And then you have one who decides, okay, I'm going to take my friend out. Okay, well, you've got to have evidence that points to that. Now, other than just, speculation in relationship to that. Yeah. So that's what we're trying to do here. Think clearly, think logically, and, where does the evidence take us? That's our mantra here. We follow the evidence, and the evidence in this case. Go ahead, Billy.
And we never try to shut anybody down. All ideas are welcome. But at some point, you've got to get to the most reasonable conclusion, right? So any idea, yeah, I'm open to discussing anything. I know you are too. So let's discuss it. But unless we come up with evidence to support something else, drowning looks like that's what happened. And I can tell you that between the two of us, we've seen a lot of homicides. The level of sophistication I don't even know how you would do this if you were going to kill somebody like that. And would you suffocate them and, then put them into the car and then, I've never seen anything like that, right? However you could draw it up. And especially you're talking about kids. I don't care if you're the smartest person in the world. That would not be how you would commit a homicide. I've never seen it, and I guarantee you haven't either, Chris.
No, but I've had a lot of bodies in the water because obviously being on the ocean there where I worked, we used to take people out of the water all the time. And, in fact, we had Scripps, La Jolla, the oceanography there, and we used to go to them. I had a case one time where a guy jumped off the pier, and they have such intense understanding of the seafloor out there off of the Pacific. And quite frankly, in a lot of the lakes too around the country. These guys are the top in the world, Scripps Oceanography. And so we would go there and ask them stuff like this and saying, okay, here it is. How would that car be manipulated with the current currents out there? What would happen? And anyway, long story short, they would predict where people would surface, and based on the tides and stuff. And man, if they, 10 days later, 15 days later, whatever it was, boom, they pop up, and the doctors would be like, told you. And so unfortunately, this is a horrible situation. It's a horrible situation, but I just want to grab one question here from, and then we're going to get into Brandon Lawson. I think this is going to be a much more interesting conversation with Brandon. So the question is from Marlena. Is it normal to wait 2 days to perform an autopsy after receiving a body? Okay, so I'll take the first shot at that, but the protocol typically, you have to line up all the investigators, you have to line up all the evidence people, and you have to also line up the doctors in terms of space available in the ME's office. So as soon as that body was delivered, it was put into a refrigerated room, and then the autopsy was planned, i.e. the doctor who was assigned that. So yes, 2 days is not a bad time frame, to be honest with you.
Yeah, pretty normal. In fact, pretty quick.
Yeah, that was pretty fast.
Yeah.
Okay, so Billy, we've got Mr. Brandon Lawson. And by the way, I haven't timed anybody out. I see somebody saying I haven't timed anybody out. So, but this is an interesting situation. So tell the audience here, break this down. Mr. Lawson takes an Alford plea. What exactly is going on here, bud?
Okay. Do you want to give the quick 30-second update on what this guy was charged with? And
yeah, go ahead.
I know I see it right there, but do you have any facts that you want to?
Yeah. So there are two underage, and thank you, Tammy, very much, underage juveniles, under 18. And Mr. Lawson here, Brandon Lawson, who is the son of the sheriff in Hawkins County, is charged with 4 counts of aggravated sexual battery. And he takes an Alford plea, which Billy's going to break down here, and he's sentenced to 4 5-year consecutive problems here, total of 20 years. He will serve 1 and then 19 supervised probation and register for life as an RSO. And for some, this is a trigger warning. I want to give you guys a heads up. If any of you feel uncomfortable during this conversation, just be aware of that. We're going to maintain the YouTube guidelines. But anyway, so he takes a plea, Billy.
Okay.
Break it down.
So you can plead guilty, you can plead innocent, you can plead no contest, or you can enter what's called an Alford plea. So no contest and Alford pleas are generally not favored by prosecution or courts. So whenever I see somebody enter an Alford plea, it tells me a couple things. One is perhaps the evidence wasn't as strong as it could be, or for one reason or another, there was a deal worked out. And I'm not trying to be a conspiracy theorist, but Alford pleas are not the normal course of business, because what an Alford plea allows you to do is to say, I'm not pleading guilty, but I will acknowledge that you have enough evidence that if we went to trial, that you could get a guilty verdict against me. And so in order to take advantage of the plea offer, I'm willing to sign a plea agreement that indicates that I'm guilty, but I'm not saying I'm guilty, right? And you can see that the Alford plea is there, and I'll talk more about that in a second. And the fact it's attempted aggravated sexual battery, so they pled it down from aggravated sexual battery to attempted aggravated sexual battery, which is, a lesser number of years that you're exposed to. So you get this Alford plea, and what's the benefit of an Alford plea? What's the benefit of going in there and saying, well, I'm not saying I'm guilty, but I acknowledge that you have enough evidence to show that I'm guilty if we went to trial, and I believe that there's a real possibility I would be found guilty. So I'm just going to, enter into this plea. So ordinarily in a plea agreement, a guilty plea agreement, there's something called a factual basis. You have to stand up there and say, yes, I shot Abraham Lincoln. I was in a theater. I jumped off the balcony and broke my leg. You have to state the facts of the case so that the court can find that there's sufficient factual basis to find you guilty and accept your guilty plea. One of the things that concerns me about Alford pleas is rehabilitation, right? Especially when you're talking about sexual assaults or sexual batteries. Rehabilitation is extremely important. And usually in a sexual assault case, especially if there's a finding of guilt or a guilty plea, there's a risk assessment done, right? Will this person reoffend? I don't know if that was done here or not, but generally they are done. Risk assessments are done. But if you want to be rehabilitated, it requires a couple of basic things. One is that you acknowledge the crime, that you accept responsibility for the criminal behavior, and that you identify the underlying causes of the criminal behavior, and that you get treatment and are successfully rehabilitated from treating the underlying cause of the criminal behavior. An Alford plea, you're not saying you're guilty. You haven't made any acknowledgement of guilt. So that concerns me when it comes to rehabilitation, especially if you're talking about sexual offenses, right? You definitely want somebody in treatment, and I'm sure that's a part of the plea as well, that he'll receive treatment. I haven't seen it, but I'm just making that assumption. It almost always is. But in an Alford plea, he has not accepted responsibility other than to say, well, I'll agree that you could find me guilty at trial. Okay, I'm not saying I did it, right? So that always concerned me and bothered me, and I think it bothers prosecutors and courts as well. That's why they're not really a favored way of entering a guilty plea. If the victims of the crimes want to sue him, an Alford plea allows him to go into civil court and say, I didn't actually do it, right? If you pled guilty, laid a factual basis, and then somebody wanted to sue them civilly, they could use that as evidence against them in a civil case. Here in an Alford plea, there's no statement, so there's nothing to be used in a civil case if there was a civil suit against him. He could go in there and say, no, I didn't do it, right? He could still make that claim, and they would have no evidence to the contrary other than what they found in the original case. But his statements won't be used against him. So Alford pleas, I'm not a big fan of them, but sometimes you get into a situation where the prosecutor is a little worried, well, maybe the case isn't that strong. And the defense attorney is saying, well, I'm insisting on an Alford plea. And just to get it across the finish line, they'll say, okay, we'll agree to that. That's kind of how those negotiations go.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that's really interesting about obviously him, being not only the acting sheriff's son, but this is all going on, between 2018 and 2020. But nobody heard about this at all anywhere. It was sent over to the Dan Armstrong at the 3rd Judicial District Attorney General's office. I think where this is kind of an interesting conversation that we can have is he is also overseeing, the disappearance of 5-year-old Summer Wells. So what's interesting is this guy, the sheriff's son, I read the victim impact statements just a little bit ago from a newspaper article. And they basically said, look, this guy did A, B, C, and D, and I'm traumatized for life. But we're going to go ahead and accept the plea bargain here and the Alford plea. Explain how that works, towards survivors of SA in terms of, having them have an opportunity to say what they need to say about this guy. I did not know that if they sue civilly now, he can actually deny it. I had no idea. I forgot about that.
So Yeah, victims, almost every state now has victims' rights laws, right, that allows the victims to be a part of the process and to make a statement and say what impact the crime has had on their lives, right? And so the prosecutors will generally take that into consideration when making a plea offer. They're not bound by it, but they have to listen to it, right? And the court has to hear what is the impact on the victims. And so the prosecutor could say, and look, if it was assuming it's a female, right, or females, if it was my daughter, yeah, there's no punishment that would be strong enough. So prosecutors and courts take that into consideration, that the victims and their families, they're not going to be satisfied. Even in death penalty cases, there's no satisfaction, right? There's nothing that can unring that bell. So the damage that's been done by the perpetrators of these crimes, yeah, you're not going to make the victims happy generally. Now, there are some victims and victims' families. We've dealt with, like Mary Chris in the Miliete case, a loving, forgiving family so people have different reactions. And it's not for me to say one is right or one is wrong, but I've just seen it both ways. But the prosecutor will take that into account. So just the same as if somebody said, well, I forgive them. I don't want them to go to jail, or I don't want them to get a death penalty. They take that into consideration, and, then they go on with what society views as an acceptable form of punishment for these things. Now, I see on the bottom, you've got that he's got consecutive sentences, 4 or 5 year consecutive sentence, 20 years. Assuming this is his first offense or offenses, that's not an unusual sentence, right? So I don't like the Alford plea, but that sentence is probably typical. It depends on the facts of the case, right? If it was a horrific, knife wielding assault of some kind, yeah, maybe. If it was a consensual, other than the fact that somebody was under the age of consent, other than that, it would have been a consensual sexual encounter. All of these things are taken into consideration by the courts and by the prosecutors. And the fact that he's got 19 years hanging over his head, if he doesn't comply with what's going on, then that's a pretty big hammer hanging over him. And they will not hesitate to use that hammer. So he's a lifetime sex offender, registered sex offender. That's also a big punishment, that your life is forever changed like that, right? And it should be, right? We don't want people who are sex offenders out there, roaming the streets unsupervised. So, but it definitely changes your life, and it covers everything. These lifetime sex offender registrations cover everything from forcible rape at gunpoint, with violence and beatings, to sometimes just somebody's 25 and their girlfriend is, 14 or whatever, which we find inappropriate. So we don't know what the circumstances are. There's a lot of people out there who are registered sex offender, and it's a good idea to keep an eye on them, but their lives will never be the same. And so it is a stiff punishment. And that 19 years, there's more than just that, by the way. So when you're a registered sex offender, if you move and you don't inform the sheriff where you move into that county within 10 days that you are a registered sex offender, then you're going to pick up another felony, an additional felony count. And pretty soon that's going to stack up. And you're going to wind up doing life in prison on the installment plan, right? You do it a year or two at a time, right? But for the rest of your life, you're in and out of the system. That's to protect society. So,
yeah, no. So, I mean, I got to, kind of weigh in on a couple of things. Him being an RSO for life, obviously, Billy and I understand that, yeah, you can't put these guys in a therapy program, right? They're broken. It is what it is. I mean, you are not going to rehabilitate these guys. It just doesn't happen. Billy, have you ever had anybody who, had done, crazy stuff on the SA side. Have they ever been rehabilitated other than stuck in the joint and they take care of it?
Well, yeah, I've done a lot of these essay cases, right? Um, and we used to play a game when they would bring the prisoners in on the chain, right, in the morning court, and they'd, all be linked together, and they march them into court, and the court's full of attorneys and the judges there and all the guards, and we would play a game as attorneys. We'd be like, okay, see if you can spot the sex offender, and there's just a
It's
look.
not hard.
There's just a look, but it's almost a physical, chemical change in them. And I know some people out there are going to, I'm not a psychologist or psychiatrist, but based on my experience with these people, this is hardwired into their brain. And when you talk to them and you hear some of the stories, um, can I say one story real quick?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so hit a guy with the charge, and I believe the age were 5, 7, and 9. The neighbor's daughters. Uh, said, "Well, I'll admit to the 9 and the 7-year-old, but the 5-year-old, she was actually flirting with me. She would jump onto my lap." I'm like, "No, no, there's something broken in you, and it's never going to be fixed." Uh, so I've never seen somebody rehabilitated. That's not to say that somebody hasn't been. And again, there's a whole spectrum of sexual assault perpetrators. So maybe somebody on the outer edge that's maybe a technical violation that maybe they're not all that bright. And they're like, well, I didn't realize that, I couldn't touch my 14-year-old girlfriend there. Right. So, yeah,
Yeah,
some people might be trainable.
they can only learn how to recognize it. It's like an alcoholic where, alcoholism is a serious disease, but this kind of stuff actually rewires the brains. I mean, it's on steroids, where and today with the fuel that's available. And by the way, if you want to see a great program next week, we're going to do two. Billy's going to be on the panel with us over at Rumble because I've assembled a panel of amazing experts in about this very subject. Because there is a whole bunch around the horizon here with this virtual reality and stuff like that coming. And quite frankly, I don't think it would fly here, on with the community guidelines here. But over there, it's going to fly. So, make sure you guys get over to my channel over there on Rumble and be with us next week. But, going to this idea, I've never, ever met anybody, and my background. I've never met one of these guys that if they walked into, a place where all these children are, they really are dangerous. And, and it's going to get worse. And this is where I think where people are kind of set back here on this one is, we've got this little 5-year-old girl, right? Summer Wells. Sorry. Let me got to get a drink out of my puppy cup. Sorry about that. Where, this guy is overseeing it, and it's his own kid in the background that is, also doing the same thing now differently. And what I mean by that is I'm not suggesting there's anything on Summer yet, but I am suggesting that the father of Summer there is ample evidence that he has done many things to many women in the state of Utah, and they've actually, been investigating that for quite some time. That said, in this situation, you've got the sheriff. Now, mind you, he doesn't live with that kid, his son. And, his son now, goes and gets a deal. Basically, that's what I think. I think that's how people feel, that he got a sweet deal while simultaneously investigating the Summer Wells case, or at least his team investigating the Summer Wells case. How does that look right, to the public, where, you know, you get hold of the AG's office and say, hey, you know, there's two perspectives from my looking through. That could have been a good thing because he recused himself and said, look, our agency can't look at this. You guys need to look at this. And it's my kid. Thoughts out of the box on that, Billy?
Yeah, that's the right move, to recuse yourself if you've got a conflict of interest or perceived or actual conflict. And here it appears to be an actual conflict. And do you have a problem with another case, right? That's in the same county now, then, you know, as people start to lose trust. And that's when people lose trust, that's where conspiracy theories come.
Yep.
If you have lost the trust and confidence of your community, bad luck, sheriff. I mean, he can do what he wants, and it's not my community; it's that community. But I mean, at some point, you've got to get out of the business just so that the community can feel safe. We all need to feel safe in our communities.
Yeah, and we just went through that with Dee's case. I mean, up in Michigan, it was like, let us get this right. You know, one of the detectives is dating, you know, so and so, such and such. We're like, what? You know, and so yeah, this is another what moment. Okay,
Yeah.
and I was, you know, really surprised to see this whole thing, you know, behind the scenes going on, and you know, all of a sudden, the kid gets, you know, 19 years. So here's a question, right? How is it he was sentenced 20 but only has to serve 1? Diane.
So I said there was a hammer hanging over his head, and that is the 19 years. So he can still serve that 19 years. He's on probation until that time runs. At any point, if he violates probation, if he does something wrong, if he doesn't follow through with treatment, they can yank him in there, and they can. That's why I was talking a little earlier about life in prison on the installment plan, because, you know, you mess up, they yank you in for 6 months, they yank you back for another year. Um, so yeah, that's pretty common. They suspend. So he does a year, and he'll do that locally because that's the max you can do locally. And then the 19 years will be suspended, but you're going to be on probation for that entire time. You're going to have to report to a probation officer. You're going to have to go through treatment. You're going to have to try to find work, which is very difficult for sex offenders, right? You got to find a place to live, and the work can't be around, you know, children, schools. You can't have contact, and if you've got family members who have underage children, you can't be around them. I mean, it's pretty restrictive. So it's a tough life, and that's why so many of them mess up and just keep going in and out of the system, because it's tough to follow all the rules, right? So 20 years serves 1, the other 19 are hanging over his head, and that's the hammer that they can hit him with. So hopefully I answered that.
Did you and RN says, in my opinion, RSOs are never rehabilitated.
I agree.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, they're
That's,
tough, and this one triggers Brandon so many questions about Summer.
yeah.
You know, I can't disagree with that either, Janet. To be honest with you, I mean, I'm going to take a harder look at some of the other things, you know, behind the scenes. And thank you, Janine, for that. Let's see what we got here. Yeah, he goes contested. He runs solo. He's been there 12 years as the sheriff in that county. And people are feeling that, you know, hey, this is a sweetheart deal for his son, and he kept it quiet. He kept it under the, you know, the covers there. He was a youth leader at his church, apparently, and you know that was his
Brandon
cover
was?
play. Yeah, Brandon was.
Mm.
Yeah, I mean, let's go into some of the, because I know you have dealt with so many of these guys as well. Let's talk about where, you know, where do you think we're headed with all of the fuel available? And I know we're going to really dig into it next weekend, but what's your takeaway on where we're headed as a society and even just culturally
Um,
in the world?
it's It's very complicated, right? Sexual behavior is very complicated. Now, if for people who are attracted sexually to children, for me, that's not very complicated. Maybe it was, and I've seen it where they were the original victim, right? When they were 5 years old, they were molested by a family member or raped by somebody. So then that gets hardwired into their brain. But like someone just said, I believe it was an RN, can't rebuild him because the brain chemistry has changed. They're just a different person. So when you're talking about those child molesters or hardcore rapists, people who are violent rapists, and there's on that spectrum, they're right next to murderers, right? If you're a violent rapist, you will at some point, if you're not caught, you will murder, right? It's right on that same lines. That's the way they think, right? And that's unfixable. But is our desires created, reinforced? So, and people have this discussion about the violent video games, right? Are we creating violence by these video games where they go around, they shoot them up, and they beat each other, and they have sex with prostitutes, or sexually assault people? Have we increased the violence because of these things, or are we just feeding the need? That's a complicated question. I'm not a psychologist. I've just seen a lot of this stuff, just like you. But
next week we are going to have forensic psychologists, though. We're as part of the panel, right?
There are people who believe you can create an obsession, you can create a fetish. So some people have a foot fetish, right? They're sexually excited by feet, right? The smell, the look, the touch, right? And so where did that come from? You're not genetically born to be attracted to feet, because that doesn't, allow you to reproduce as a human, right? So that's not what people might call normal, but it definitely exists. And how does it get there? At some point, are they exposed and then reinforced with that behavior? And is that where we're going with this virtual reality, where these people are creating things and somebody thinks, well, that's funny, or that's cute, or that's exciting? But have we created a perversion, an obsession? Or are we just feeding one that's already there? I don't know.
Well, and next week we are going to dive into that at length, guys and gals. And I will tell you, we've got Dr. Ann Burgess is going to be with us, Dr. Larry Simons, Dr. Gary Bukoff, Greg Cooper, myself, Billy, and Dean. And they're actually, Ann and everybody, they're doing a study right now in the prisons. And they're going to let us into some of the things they're discovering. But this virtual reality thing is the next level. And if you just think of it this way, if Ted Bundy had access to virtual reality, what would that look like? Okay. And are we creating this whole new, problem? I mean, there are avatars right now that are being essayed in this virtual world. And we can't talk about it too much here on YT, but over there next week, please join us. It's going to be an open discussion. And I mean, Billy, this is a curveball for the legal profession too, right? I mean, they're selling virtual real estate right now out there.
Yeah. No, there are a lot of legal issues, and the law is always 10 or 20 years behind. So it's going to take a while to catch up to all of this stuff. So the technology is outpacing the legal community, which isn't hard to do because we're not all that smart. So.
And we saw this coming early on in '93 when I did the advent of the white collar predator and the intellectual predator, and here we are, Billy. You and I have both had successful careers and on both sides of the coin, and it's not any better. In fact, it's 1,000 times worse. And there was a predictive analysis that it would get worse, and now I think we're past even trying to understand it in totality. So don't miss it next week on that. So any other thoughts on Mr. Lawson here. Any thoughts that come to you, Billy?
No, I tell you this, I am looking forward to next week because I want to learn something from these people.
Yep.
Yeah, that's going to be a good show.
Me too, buddy. Those
Well,
guys always.
here's
Yeah.
here's the thought on this one.
Yep.
If there was a chain gang and all the people who are accused of crimes 20 of them were chained together, is this one that you would pick out? I don't know. I'd leave that to somebody else to decide.
Well, and that's the other chameleon aspect of this, right? What does it look like anymore? Because I mean, there was a time, and this was kind of the predictive analysis early on in 93 through 95. Remember, the first photograph that was ever translated or transferred across the internet was between 93 and 95. And so, and everybody was talking about these chat rooms and stuff. Well, now you enter this intellectual into that chat room and they're competing for the same victimology, i.e., a child. And the intellect's going to win over the creepy guy. Okay, the trench coat guy back in the day. Okay.
Mhm.
But what the public wasn't thinking about, and fortunately we were, i.e., a whole bunch of people, and was, where's that guy going? What's going to happen? And there was a predictive analysis that there would be much more assaults on the streets. And the first people that started seeing that were the ladies in the evening. These guys started becoming more and more violent. And ultimately, you ended up with To Catch a Predator in 1998, showing up, and they're, brain surgeons, lawyers, doctors, cops, coming for hundreds of miles, right, for this, victimology. And we're going to break that down a little bit more next week, because we're going to tell you, I think we're going to share what's next, and with, some of the things that are taking place. But unfortunately, we can't do it over here, but we'll see.
Yeah,
Anyway,
I want to see that show.
yeah,
Oh,
so
I will. I'll be there.
Yeah, you're
It'll
on
be
the
a great
panel.
show.
You wise guy. You're on the panel.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Yeah, we're both frauds, by the way. The internet says we're both frauds.
Yeah,
So,
apparently
oh
we're
well.
frauds. Hey, I welcome any criticism, whatever. It's what I say about my critics is sometimes I learn something about myself, but I always learn something about them.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
criticize away.
Well, let's take a brief break here for a second, and everybody weigh in, and then we'll talk a few minutes about Dee. Are you cool with that, Billy?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
Are there any
Go.
questions, or have we
Well, let's ask.
put everybody to sleep?
Well, we got a lot of comments. You're funny. I've known that for a long time.
I
He
love
is
her
funny.
name. Well, I'll be.
He is, absolutely. Lisa, let's see.
Hey, Lisa.
They want your credit card on Rumble. I don't know if that's true or not. I think
My
you
credit
just
card?
sign up. No, it's free. Okay,
Oh.
Jim, you have a question. What's your question? Hit me. Put it up, brother. Drink and breather. Love this show. Okay, somebody said. Okay, I'm going to put some music on in the background while I'm looking for some questions. Yes, sheriff is an elected role. Go ahead, Billy.
Yeah, it looks like it's sheriff and elected role. I'm assuming it is.
Yeah.
Most of them are in this country.
Okay, so we're going to talk about this one here. I asked many times, why is Don out next week? No rehab or Utah. I can't answer that question right now. I know that they're still looking at him. Maybe this has something to do with that. I don't know. I can't answer that. But that's a great question. Is my question appropriate? There's always. Rumble is free.
We should run for sheriff of the country. It's an elected position.
Are juvenile records sealed in Tennessee? Billy, you know that answer?
I don't practice law in Tennessee, but in most states they are sealed.
So. Okay. I hope this answers your Rumble, the interview room over there. Let's see here. What will happen if more victims come forward?
New charges, more charges. And so there's always, in the sentencing guidelines, there's always, your first offense, second offense, third offense, you're adding time. So let's say a first offense, and let's say this is first offense for Mr. Lawson, and then he gets 5 years, right? If that's the presumptive sentence for that. Well, a second offense may be 10 years, and a third offense may be 20 years. So now all of a sudden, you're stacking and he's getting a life sentence, right? So
Yeah.
a lot of
Who
people can
investigates the
investigate a sheriff.
Yeah, go.
The feds, the FBI, the state attorney general. Remember back in the civil rights movement, the feds had to come in and investigate the local police agencies because of civil rights violations. So, but as an elected official, there you go. There's my campaign manager, Alley Cat.
I love it.
Yeah, me and Chris, we'll co-sheriff.
We're co-sheriffs.
These people won't be walking the street when we're sheriff. I'll tell you that right now.
I tell you, they would. Do they have a 3 strikes law in Tennessee? If we know, I don't know if they do.
Know. I don't know. Like I say, I don't practice law in Tennessee. So,
yeah, we need a master sheriff.
Yeah, we do need like a master sheriff, don't we? Somebody who's like, hey, why is this guy walking the streets? What's wrong with you?
I love it. Here's a good one right there. Sally has a question. Alfred Law and no contest.
Very similar. The Alfred is just the name of the case. It's I think it was North Carolina, Alfred versus North Carolina. I went up to the U.S. Supreme Court, and that's why it was called an Alfred plea. But very similar effect. I would say they're almost interchangeable.
Okay.
Thanks, Sally.
We need 100,000 more Grady Judds across this country. Let's see.
That one's over my head.
Yeah, that. Well, she's that's a compliment. Grady Judges in Florida, and he's a no nonsense dude, man. He puts all their pictures up and says this guy did A, B, C, and D, and I just love that dude. He's
good.
Yeah, he needs to be training across the country.
Nice.
Is
that the sheriff down there that said, "Oh, that guy's great"?
Yeah, you come into our town and we'll shoot you.
Yeah.
That guy.
Yeah, you break into somebody's house, you get shot. That's the deal.
Yeah, that guy. Yeah,
recidivism rate. It's very high. Like we were talking about. I don't know the actual rate. Extremely high, and that's why they started doing these risk assessments. Almost mandatory now when you sign up for a sex assault plea offer or if you're found guilty, because everybody wants to know what is the risk to reoffend, what is your risk to recidivate. So it is high, right? So some crimes the recidivism is low, and it depends on who the psychology and the chemistry of the perpetrator.
So Kim thinks Buddy could do a better job. Sure. Let me ask him. Budzo, want to run for sheriff? No.
Well, Butters is going to co-sheriff with him. He's sitting right here.
He could be the chief deputy. Where is Butters? How's he doing, by the way? What's a pup update?
He's right under my feet, man. We're going to nickname him Velcro because he's always stuck to me.
And I got Buddy sitting right next. Well, he's laying next to me. He's supposed to be up here in his bed, but for some reason he's not going out there. So somebody just answered this. The real Rockin' Robin. Thank you so much, Robin. Yes, Tennessee does have a 3-strike law.
Okay.
So cool.
Well, there you go. There's one.
Tell our folks from across the pond, Billy, what 3 strikes is in the United States.
Well, they saw that people a long time ago, yay, I like it. Thanks, Jan. So a long time ago, they noticed that people just kept reoffending and reoffending and reoffending, and that was harmful to people in society. And so they said, okay, we'll give you a chance to rehabilitate. You get 1, 2. It's like a baseball game. 1, 2, 3 strikes, you're out. So 3 strikes law is if you have 3 violent or serious offenses, that's a life sentence. They came up with that to protect society. There have been a lot of challenges to that under the 8th Amendment, cruel and unusual punishment, some successful, some not successful. And you certainly don't want to just, see a grandma sit in prison for the rest of her life because she sold marijuana 30 years ago, right? But you also don't want to see these violent sexual predators walking the street. So, yeah, that's 3 strikes. Do you want to add to that, Chris?
Yeah, no, 3 strikes and you're in. The first violent, and each one of these crimes, obviously they measure them out. It depends on, the first one, they'll say, okay, 1, you got 1, and then you get 2, and then 3, you're done. You're out. You're in prison for the rest of your life.
Yeah, and they all the states that have those, they enumerate what those offenses are that fall into those 3 strike category. I like that 3 strikes you're in. That's funny.
Yep. In Canada, they call it dangerous offenders. Thanks, Finn.
Yeah.
Thanks, Finn. Let's see here. And this, find me, the program for SO in the Department of Correction, Washington State, much with the offender works, there are men who were not affected. Yeah. So the guy that's coming on next week, one of them is actually running that program. So you're not going to want to miss it.
So there are people, and these guys, a lot of them do not want to be who they are. They don't like themselves. Some of them have even mutilated their own genitals so that they wouldn't reoffend. But the problem is it's not in the genitals, it's in their brain. So, totally off topic. Let me hear Billy's thoughts on Waukesha Parade massacre trial. Defendant's representing himself and is out of control.
Are you watching this guy?
I'm not watching it, but I've had wacky people try to represent themselves, and there's always that's really up to the judge. The judge needs to get control of that courtroom and that trial if that's going on. There's a standard for competency to stand trial, right? But there's an additional standard for competency to represent yourself. And I've had clients like this where, yes, they're not mentally incompetent. Yes, they are competent to stand trial, but they're absolutely not competent to represent themselves. And whoever is, and they usually appoint standby counsel. So there's an attorney or a team of attorneys waiting to jump in. So when the judge, throws a penalty flag and says, "Oh, this is way out of control. You're just, making a mockery of the whole thing." So there's standby counsel for that. And the judge can just say, "Okay, I've given you your shot." And then I forgot the case name, but there's a case, and I filed this motion before, where you can just say, "No, judge, you can't let this guy represent himself." And the court really runs a risk when they do that and allow somebody to get out of control. They run a risk on appeal, right? So you've got to maintain the integrity of the system for all of us, not just because some defendant is out of control.
Do you think he's manipulating the system on purpose? I
don't know the case. I know the case, but I haven't been following the trial. But do I think that people that are criminals and possibly sociopaths manipulate other people? Probably. Yeah.
This guy's he's yelling at the judge. He's like, just going absolutely crazy. And this poor judge has been an absolute, level.
That's on the judge. That's on the judge.
Yep.
The judge has to maintain control of that courtroom, not just for herself, for the rest of us. I mean, this is the legal system that we all rely on. So she needs to get control of that courtroom.
Yeah, she's even kicked him out and put him in another courtroom on video so that he can be there, right? Be there.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's threatened her. I mean, I only watched a couple of pieces on TV, and this guy's a real keeper, man. I could see you.
So he's threatening the judge. So he's
No,
threatening the judge.
he's threatening the judge.
Well, there's additional charges for you.
Yeah, I mean, go ahead.
No, he's never getting out of prison. This is some out of control criminal that the judge needs to get under control. He needs to get control of that courtroom. Wackadoodle. Now that's a technical term.
That's just terrible. He's a wackadoodle. That's right. He's a piece of work.
Type of dog?
Yeah. He is a wackadoodle. She's given him room for the appeal. Yeah. Interesting.
Good.
Okay, so let's talk. Let's what do we got on D? I know that. Well, what say you? Where do you want to go with D? Because I know you've got a lot moving.
Oh man, there is a lot on that, and there are some bombshells. So when the Michigan State Police took the case over in the first part of August, I said, okay, and it's not me, right? I'm not acting like I'm in charge of anything, but the victims' families gave them time, said, okay, and I understood, you've got to get up to speed, especially on a complex case like this. You've got to review the evidence. You've got to figure out what the elements are, if there's a crime, if so, who all's involved. And this is more complicated than just a domestic violence gone bad case. This is a financial crime with many moving parts and some people who are trying to hide stuff. But boy, is there some good new stuff out. So Michigan State Police, I told them, hey, I'm going to give you guys time, right, to do the right thing and do the case. And that's what I'm doing. So I have not said anything, and I'm trying to be respectful to the victim's family, to Dee's family, to allow the process to work. But the clock is ticking. So December 1st, there's the deadline. So if after December 1st, there's not an arrest in this case, and it could be for any number of crimes. There are plenty of crimes that have been exposed up there, but there needs to be an arrest by December 1st. And if there's not, I'm going to drop some bombs in December, and people are going to be shocked when they hear what's going on. I would love to say it right now, right? Because I like to be breaking news, but that's the timeline, December 1st.
Okay, so everybody knows, and thank you, Kyra, that very kind. Everybody knows, and this is I Am the Storm. She was surprised to see downtown disappeared with Mr. Billy, by the way. I call him Hollywood now. I need to get his autograph every time I talk. No, he's we don't mean that. And those of you who are go ahead.
No, and maybe I'm giving away too much, but we don't do this for the publicity. The publicity is used to keep these cases from getting cold. It's used to apply a little pressure to the people who are running these cases, not trying to become a star, not interested in being a star. But sometimes the media, and that's, the beauty of our Constitution, the First Amendment, and the freedom of the press and freedom of speech, is that we can use that tool to kind of nudge law enforcement, elected officials to do the right thing. And that's an effective use of that. If I lived in a perfect world, I would never be on one of those shows. Right.
And I knew you were reluctant in the very beginning, but when we talked about it and you said, look, this is, and we talked about it and about, look, this is about Dee. And, I know how you are. You're like me behind the scenes, but at the same time, I got to tell you, I think you did a great job, not only there, but just, on some of the other appearances that you've been going on, for Dee. And, And at some point, I think you guys all heard it tonight. I mean, right on target. December 1. I mean, we've been pretty patient. I mean, the fact that the sheriff pulled out and said, "Yep, it's got to go to Michigan State Police."
That was August 1st. So all of August, what's that, 31 days? All of
Yep.
September, and now all of October. And yeah, we better see some action because I don't pull punches.
No, and you know, when we're done with that, you know, there's a couple others. I know you're going 1,000 miles an hour like I am, but just so everybody knows, Billy and I are in constant contact. We're good friends. Where our dogs love each other, our wives love each other. We both married way up, and you know, we do this because it's the right thing to do. I mean, we take a lot of criticism for it. You know, people are constantly, you know, you're doing something right when they attack you. You know, and they got no other content, so you're the target. Okay, you know,
Yeah,
we're good with that.
I'm fine. I'm comfortable in my skin. I do what I think is the right thing to do. I don't do it for money. I don't do it for fame. I don't do it to get on the internet and, you know, be like some of those guys. Yeah. Hey, Peggy, me too. I
So
agree. She wasn't my friend, but oh, disappeared. Hey, Kelly. Disappeared is it's a Discovery ID channel program. So it was season 10, episode 5. So disappeared, Discovery ID channel, season 10, episode 5.
can we
They
put
did a
that in
really
the
nice
chat?
job. I
Say it
think they
again one more time, Billy. We're going to put it in the chat.
okay. Season 10, episode 5. Disappeared on the ID channel. You can also get on Discovery Plus. Um, yeah, they did a nice job. They are very good at telling that story.
She says thank you.
Hey,
Don't we have the greatest audience? I mean, I'll take this audience over
I
50
will
times.
take this audience over a lot of the others I've seen. This is a very sophisticated um, audience that you have. They're not your average people out there. They know how to process. They know how to think critically. And if you and I were to make a mistake, I'm sure they would let us know, and that'd be fine with us,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
We're all
Yeah.
just out here trying to do something good and trying to find the truth. So feel free to criticize me. I welcome it.
So the Finn is new with us, Billy. So just a high level run by for D.
Oh boy. Okay, so up in a farming town up in Michigan, and I think the Finn is from Canada, right?
Mm-hmm.
So farming town up in Michigan. Dee is married to somebody called Dale. She had finally had enough. She was going to go tell her husband that she wanted a divorce. Friend knew that she took the 9-year-old minor daughter. There's 4 other adult children. The friend took the 9-year-old daughter away. That was the last anybody ever saw of Dee when she went to tell her husband that she wanted a divorce and they wanted to sell the businesses. So she apparently left this remote place with no car, no cell phone, no credit cards, not being seen on any of the security cameras leaving the property. Um, it took us a while, and by a while I mean, hundreds and hundreds of hours of interviews and reviewing evidence and stuff, but narrowed down to obviously it was the husband, right? We never start with that. We have to eliminate other possibilities. So we didn't start by saying, oh, it must be the husband. We just looked at the evidence and talked to the witnesses and took us where it was, and their evidence has been overwhelming. We've had numerous shows on it. Hey, the Finn, I would say, Chris, do you have those old ones? Because there's a timeline and some
Yep.
PowerPoint presentation.
There's a playlist for D. So hit the playlist and you can watch all the coverage.
Yeah, you can spin through the PowerPoint presentation pretty quickly, so you don't have to watch it for hours and hours unless you want to.
And there's some good comments here. Said, please take on Summer after. Yeah, well, I mean, we've talked about it a lot, trust me, behind
Yeah,
the scenes, but we have to get through some other stuff that the two of us are involved in.
yeah,
And so when that happens, and D, well, we've got a commitment to D to make sure that that falls into place.
yeah.
Yes, we are, TR.
Mm,
We were talking, complimenting our audience. I agree with you. Thank you, Billy. We
yeah,
think you. And go
I
ahead.
saw that there was somebody said this is not a tabloid channel. That's right. This is a factual, honest look at real evidence, and we don't speculate.
Yeah.
Oh,
Eh,
that's
let's see
nice.
here.
Well, I'll
Timelines
be.
were timelines were brilliant. Yeah.
Yeah.
Y- you under some, and I know he won't let me do this all the time, but I got to keep doing this. I'm sorry. If you want to know who this guy is, okay, seriously, uh, you've got to take a moment and really get to know Billy Little. He is one of the most brilliant legal minds, in my opinion, and many others in this country. He has been on both sides of the coin. He's been a judge, he's been a defense attorney, on the prosecution side helping. He's also been an investigator, an investigative attorney, and he's worked all over the world. And the most important part is he's married to a wonderful woman. He's got an amazing dog, and he does this out of the goodness of his heart when on stuff like this. And then he's also spent how many years in the military?
A lot.
A lot. And he's retired as a colonel from the United States military. So he served this country honorably. And, he's been there, done that, as they say. Been there, done that. He's a great warrior, a great friend, and he's even got a picture of himself in a Russian hat
Oh,
in
oh.
in Afghanistan.
No,
Yeah,
that was in Kosovo.
Kosovo.
Went up. That was funny. I went up to the Russian checkpoint and I asked the guy to use it, if I could have his hat and his
Do you
AK.
have
And
do you have
I
that?
posed with
You have to
the
show him that
Curry
picture.
hat and the AK. I took the guy's rifle. I'm telling you, those Russians, they'll sell you anything. Hey, give me $20 for your rifle.
And,
It was pretty funny.
anyway, and he hasn't written any books. That is a great question. Yeah, have you written any books? No, he has. I don't know. Have you written any books other
No,
than you've
no,
written law stuff? I mean, a ton of law stuff.
no.
Um,
People, I mean, I don't know if I thought it would be beneficial to the world, I would, but I'm not going to write a book just so I can talk about all the nonsense that I've done in my life. I mean,
I,
it's,
I
I
don't
mean,
want to, I don't want to drop off that Russian picture because I saw, we have to share that one day.
oh,
Okay. We
good.
have to share that. J-Lo says when she saw you on the show, she said, that's my dude, Billy.
That's funny. No, you know what I reminded myself of was Michael Dukakis wearing that helmet. That's what I kind of look like. I look
Oh,
like
yeah.
a goofy guy with a Russian hat and a AK.
I love it. I love it. I'm gonna grab this one here, Ellen. I think DW make a return to you to your thoughts? What's next for him? My thoughts are, and this is going to be just my opinion. He is an addict and an alcoholic. He's going to chase both of those because he's been locked up for so long, and he's going to go right back to his old ways. So put your seatbelts on. You heard it here first, and he'll be right back in time. So the guy just did, almost a year, Billy, and he's coming out. So that's what this is about. That question. Sorry. Yes, he is great. Uh, so yes, we have to share that. People are asking here. They want to know about the Russian picture. So the next time we come on, Billy, you got to bring
Oh, so embarrassing.
Yeah. Yeah. You
I
have to
look
bring that one up.
stupid. I look really dumb, but I'll do it. I'll do it because I just don't care.
So, Utah. So one of the things about Utah, and we could talk about the law on this one here. So they're looking at the statute of limitations. There's only one loophole, and you explained this before in relationship to suppressed memory or oppressed memory. What is the right legal terminology for it?
Repress.
Repressed memory. So kind of do a high, if you remember. So Mary's case and Jeannie's case is at the DA's office. It's being reviewed for charges against DW. There are a total of 7 victims. 3 of them are solid. The other 4 are good, but they're not as strong, but they are survivors and they are victims. And you can, kind of explain what I mean by that from the legal position, but
So, yeah.
go ahead.
So we covered this in probably a lot of detail, but high level view is, so there's a statute of limitations, and the statute of limitations has run. There are some exceptions for it. The law has since changed, but because of our rule against imposing ex post facto laws, meaning you can't create a law today to make something that you did yesterday criminal, you can't change a statute of limitations and make it retroactive, right? So if the statute of limitations under the old law has run, which it has in that case, you can't change the law to make it different. Now, there are exceptions for minors, and there are exceptions for if you didn't discover the evidence, if you didn't know about it, but that was not the case here. So they were aware of the crimes way back when. Unfortunately, it wasn't reported back then. It wasn't investigated back then. Sometimes if the person goes into hiding, that tolls the statute of limitations. There are some exceptions, but when we looked into it, none of the exceptions applied in this case. So I think I'd have to agree with the prosecutor that
Except for the repressed memory aspect of it, and she had reported it, but it never got chased down, so that's kind of the loophole.
Okay, then that's possible. I mean, I would defer to the prosecutor. It seems to have a good handle on the law and the facts in that case. And if they feel like there's something to go after, I think that they will, right? And that's part of the problem in the cases that we all deal with, is that some of these stories don't have an end, right? And that's not, as human beings, we need an end, right? It's like watching, the old Rocky boxing movies, but never knowing how the fight turned out, right? We're never comfortable with that. We need to know. We need to have a conclusion, and sometimes we don't. And that's one of the frustrating things about these cases. Sometimes there's no prosecution.
And just to shift gears again, this is a really good point, especially in today's environment. Somebody will use that picture again.
Oh yeah.
So don't show it. Do not. Okay, that's a great point. Thank you, Cheryl, for bringing that solid point up.
Good, because I look stupid in that picture anyway. Thanks, Cheryl. You saved me.
Yes. Can Don's sister still get justice out of this after all this time? Yes. What are some other options from the victims of individuals like this for Jeannie and Mary?
I don't know. Sometimes you don't get justice. I don't know.
Can they go civil if they had to?
Civil actions have to be filed more quickly than the criminal ones do.
Okay.
You're going to fall. I mean, a lot of times you've got a 6-month to 2-year window when you have to file it. Thanks, Cynthia. I always feel bad when people tell me thanks for our military service, because I feel like I got more out of it than I gave. So I feel a little guilty, because it was just such an honor and a pleasure, and to do something good for this country. But thank you, Cynthia.
You're a great American, Mr. Billy Little. And okay, so I've had you an hour and a half. That's where I want to always run. You don't have a YouTube channel. You're too busy. That's what he's going to tell you.
You'll get my bill.
Yeah, get his bill. Exactly. Exactly. And, you know, those of you that have just joined us here tonight, you're right. 100%. He is very humble. And I love him like my brother. And, you know, we've become really good friends over the last year and a half to where, you know, we've realized that we're kind of kindred spirits here. And there's a lot, you know, with my background with my dad and my mom being in the Marine Corps, and Billy's background with all the things that he's done. And then, of course, you add the dynamics of what we have going on here, as well as, you know, the law enforcement attorney stuff. So, okay, as always, Billy, my guest gets the last word on anything you want to talk about tonight or that we talked about. And then everybody, if you really love what you're hearing here or like what you're hearing here, we only ask one thing, that you hit that subscribe button and then that you give it a thumbs up and pass it over, you know, and pass it along to your friends and family. And that really means a ton for us, because it allows us to do the things that we're doing here and bringing justice to these families and at least helping in some way, you know, those who cannot help themselves. So anyway, I just think, again, this is a great American. And Billy, you have the last word. And at the very end, as you know, when you're done, we're going to go to Hawaii, brother. All yours.
All right, Chris, man. I do love you, Chris, and I appreciate the service you've given this country and your community for your whole life. We need to keep fighting, man. Evil wins when good people do nothing. So keep fighting. Don't give up.
Hard working every day, I'm stressed out 24/7, babe. No timeouts, wish we could fly away. You and I go to our favorite place. Oh yeah, make special memories together. I'll be your company now and forever. I say we fly away, you and me, go to our favorite place. Feeling the sun on my face in Hawaii. With you, Hawaii. With you, Hawaii. With you, Hawaii. I need a summer breeze, some fresh air to put my mind at ease. No cares. You wanna come with me? Me and you go to our favorite tree. Are you ready now? We jump on a plane now. We're taking away. Yeah, we're taking away. Don't hesitate now. We're taking away. Yeah, we're taking away. We'll never come down. We're going away. Yeah, we're going away. You and me. Feeling the sun on my face in a while.